My mother was an unwed mother back in 1953 when things were very different than they are now. Every time she looked at me, it was sort of a reminder of what she had done, and so there was always a tension there. And when I was 8, she got married to a man who wasn't always pleasant. She proceeded to have 5 kids very quickly, and I was the built-in babysitter for that. And then there also had been some molestation by a family member in the middle of that. I tried to commit suicide for the first time at 8. And I didn't understand it, and I couldn't put words to it. I couldn't articulate anything. But I knew that if I wasn't around, things would be better. Covertly, I always got the message that it was all my fault. Over time, I had more and more responsibility over the kids. Like every afternoon, I had to come home and take them until dinner time. And then I had to feed them dinner and give them their baths and pick up the playroom. Just a lot of resentment around that, and that all these kids were their kids, and I was sort of the, hired help. I turned to drugs and alcohol. Within about a year, I was a full-blown heroin addict and doing things that I was not proud of to get money for heroin. I was living sort of in a crash pad, and I stole some drugs from a dealer who was also living in the same place with me, and he figured out that it was me that had stolen them. I agreed to go into a drug rehab, not necessarily because I wanted to get off drugs, but I really wanted to be somewhere where he couldn't find me, and as it turned out, I did get off drugs, and I've never regretted that. But unfortunately, part of the deal was that I replaced it with alcohol. I drank for another 10 years, and those 10 years I was in and out of hospitals all the time, incredibly suicidal during all that time. Really had a horrible existence. I actually did go to college in that, which was amazing, and loved it. I got A's. And it was like and that external validation that it was okay helped me a lot. The day that I graduated, I went in the hospital, and that was it from there on. It was constantly in and out of the hospital. I hit every hospital in Boston. Half of them they kicked me out of because I was just so hell-bent on destruction. In the hospital that I was in, if you went to AA meetings, you got to go out in the van, and you got to be out later, and you got some special privileges, and you stopped for ice cream on your way back, or had popcorn when you get back. When I get out of the hospital, I just kept going to some meetings, and I'd go to the meetings, and I'd listen, and I'd go home and say, what a bunch of crap, and drink on my back porch as I thought about how crappy this stuff all was. And then I had a really bad weekend, and it was like I had this little AA guru sitting on my shoulder, and I would try to not drink, and this little voice would say, aha, you can't stop. Just all of these messages that I had heard in AA, and it shifted my thinking. And I went to AA with a different mindset, and I loved it. I found a community that I loved. Sadly, I thought that this was going to cure my mental illness. And I did really well for a few years. And then my mother died when I was 2 years sober of cancer. She had been actually diagnosed when I was 3 months sober. And so, I had to go through this horrible dying process with her. And then my brother got diagnosed with cancer. Franny was just like the nicest kid in the world. He was just so wonderful. He was fair to everyone. He was kind. And so to see him have cancer was just really devastating. And he died pretty quickly. He died in less than a year from when he was diagnosed. And I lost it at that point, In the 90s, I ended up with a therapist for the first time who was extremely perfect for me. It was perfect. And she knew a lot about trauma issues, which was a big thing that I was dealing with. I think probably for the first time I was appropriately diagnosed. And it was a woman who believed in me. I was able to see the role of trauma. I was able to begin to see really the dynamics of the family. I was able to really see my mother for who she was, and to see the alcoholism and the drug addiction and her inability to resolve her stuff, and how it really played out a lot on me. And so I ended up sort of in this long-term forgiveness process of forgiving myself, forgiving the kids, and even forgiving her. She made some lousy choices, and a lot of us paid the price for it. But, she still did the best she could do. Another thing that helped was that I had a niece born 5 years ago. And right around the same time, right before I was starting school here. And this child is the love of my life. I went through adulthood really not fond of children, shall we say, after all my years, when I was younger. I remember actually the day. I was sitting outside at her house. She was probably 2 or 3 months old, holding this little thing and saying to her that I would never hurt her and that I would never let anyone else hurt her. And sitting out there and saying, it just doesn't get any better than this. One other piece that played a role was back in '98 when I had the ECT and Franny had just died and all that. My baby brother, Donnie, who's the youngest, he's 18 years younger than I. And when Franny was dying, we got very close. We were working near each other, and so we would have lunch often. And he wrote me a letter after Franny died, and I was having a hard time. And he said, when Franny was dying, I thought to myself, well, God's taken my brother away, but at least he's given me my sister back. And he talked about when he was a kid, and he said that when he was a kid, the only word he could think about me was gold. That I would come and do all these special things, and that he knew he was special in my life. And he was. I had made that decision that this one's mine. I didn't have to babysit him. He was born after I left the house. But I never knew that he got that. And so this letter said that he got that. And the letter said that now he was so afraid that I would kill myself, and that he knew that he had no power over that he was powerless, but that he wanted me to know that I would always be gold to him. And I had to write him back and tell him that I wouldn't do that to him, and it was one of the hardest things I ever did, because I had to commit to staying alive and taking away my back door. I think at this point, I feel very confident in my professional life. I plan to stay alive, which is a big thing, At one point, I never gave myself a day over 30, and in not too long, that'll be doubled. I still get symptoms. I still, have times that I go into depressions, but whoa, I'm so much better, And that is the recovery process. And what I know is that I train professionals now. I'm going to get my master's degree with a very high level of achievement in my department. I've started a program in disability services, and I'm a person who, if people heard my history, would never be able to put the two together. It'd be like there's this person and there's this person, and never do the two meet. And I guess the biggest thing I want to say to people is that they do meet. I want people to know that growth happens and recovery happens, and it's never too late. It's just never too late, There's always hope out there.